Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praise, honor, and glory to the Most High, Yahweh, Bahashem Yahushai, Bahashem Rakakwadash. And I want to say Shalom, Diakom Akwath out there pursuing this truth diligently. Coming at you real quick with a lesson, just a little quick one here. I was looking up online because I had this, let me go actually show you. I have the camera open on my phone. I'm just going to point it at it. But I was watching this video here, all right, by this guy, Deco Twint, and it's basically, if I can get it to play.
Showing this 1,000-year-old painting of Jesus. Look.
The miracles which occurred during the crucifixion of Jesus.
You can see.
The moon getting blooded, the sun getting dark.
Oh, because when Jesus got crucified, it was like a event happened.
Yes. Yeah.
The sky went dark, right?
Yes. And the curtains of the temple torn into two.
And this was apparently in,
The curtains of the temple ripped?
Ripped, yeah.
So that's why there's split here?
Yes.
And behind here, there's the Holy of Holies?
Yeah, the Holy of Holy and the altar.
The altar, that's the ark right there?
The altar is inside.
alright, Yemrahana Christos, Ethiopia. That's where it's at. Curious little question here. So is this why black people are hated so much by white people? Yes. If you want the short answer, yes. Let me get rid of that. But yes. They hate us because they know who we are at the end of the day. All right? And not just us. It's the so-called black, Latino, and Native American individuals. That's why they have so much hate and animosity towards our people. And it's because, again, it's because, to quote Kendrick Lamar, they're not like us. Hate that song. Yeah, they're not like us. And it really goes back to the birthright between Jacob and Esau, because we come down through the seed line of Jacob, and they come through Esau. So it's a thousands-year-long rivalry, right? But because of that, I just went to Google and asked it, and then when you do it, I think it brings up some version of Gemini. I'm not sure if it's Gemini, because Gemini looks different. But this, I assume, is running through Gemini, because if you look up here in the corner, it's got that little star that Gemini uses. So I'm pretty sure it's the same thing or some version of it. It says, so I said, are there more paintings, and of course you got to use their term, of Hamashiach, you're going to see Christ, but Hamashiach as white or brown. And it says, global artistic tradition shows Hamashiach depicted in the exact ethnicity of the artist, while historical accuracy points to a brown Middle Eastern man. Western culture overwhelmingly produces and popularizes painting of a white Hamashiach. However, viewed on a global scale, both versions are incredibly widespread. Well, they're both incredibly widespread, and that's not necessarily true that they say, oh, it's the painter that does it, because there are older depictions in Europe, all right, of the sun depicted in a brown version, all right, but they just like to cover those. Well, I mean, if you really want to get down to it, the original people that were in that land was the Moors, all right, which are, Moor just means dark, all right, or black. So and they try to cover that up, right? Many things are cover-up. It's just a grand cover-up. That's really what modern-day history is a giant cover-up. Let me see. Bear with me. I'm going to have to try to see if I can go plug my phone in. I do have a cord out here. Let me see. There it is. That'll do. I'm going to have to sit over here on the couch. But it says, why white Jesus dominates in the West. It says European heritage. The ubiquity of a white European Jesus largely stems from Renaissance and Middle Ages artists who painted Christ, Hamashiach, right, to look like the people in their own communities. Well, really, it does go back to the Renaissance. Okay, now they say the Middle Ages, not necessarily the Middle Ages. They consider part of the Middle Ages in the Renaissance, but the Renaissance was really something completely different than the other Middle Ages, the Dark Ages, or the medieval periods, right? The Renaissance was very specific, okay? Even if you look at the stylization that was had there, For example, I'm into the Dark Ages, medieval times, and Middle Ages. I'm not into the Renaissance, all right? I've never really been into it. I always thought the Renaissance was, like, weird. Like, I didn't think it was cool because, like, if you look at, like, you brothers and sisters that have been around here, you know I'm kind of a nerd. So if you go and look up, like, medieval art, that's Renaissance art. I'm talking about medieval art. I'll give you an example, but it's more akin to here. When was the Renaissance? When did it begin? I think it was like late 1300s or 1400s. 14th. Okay, so not 1300s at all. It was just the 14th. Well, some people say it was like partly during like the 1300s. So let me see. So let's go look at art from the 13th century. Okay, and again, you're going to see a lot of white depictions and stuff, right? I'm going to look at the 13th century. Again, Esau did a pretty good job at erasing most of the stuff. But you can go and look at 13th century. You can go look at 12th. And you can see it's just different, right? It's just different. But, and, you know, stuff like this, right? Stuff like this. And then you go and look at 14th from the Renaissance. And then you get stuff like this, which I'm not interested in at all. Okay, none of this is interesting to me whatsoever. Not one bit, excuse me. Not one bit. I don't like the art style. I like the more, this type of stuff, like manuscript type. Now, it looked very interesting, right? And, of course, you're going to have some of it still goes off. Esau was still doing, you know, they went throughout history and repainted and got rid of a bunch of stuff. So they were still plotting and scheming. You can see, there's a different art style about it, right? This is way cooler to me personally. I think this is a way cooler art style. And then even if you look at like 12th century attire, okay, and then if you look at Renaissance attire, it's completely different. This is usually what you see a lot for the men, which I think is ridiculous. I'm not into it. That's more French Renaissance. And I'm one to go to occasional Renaissance fairs, right? I just feel it out. I don't know if I'll go, but it just depends. You know, big crowds and stuff and whatnot. Usually I just go there. I like to go and look because it's basically like a big market. But really, they should be called medieval fairs, all right? Because they're more based off of general medieval than they are Renaissance. There's at least at the Renaissance fairs that I've been to, and there's pretty much nothing Renaissance about them at all. They're pretty much more 10th, 11th, 12th, 13th century than anything from the 14th century and up. But again, you know, even further than that, you know, Viking and Celtic and, you know, 10th century. Right? Very old stuff like this. Okay? Not necessarily... you know, they're more based on like little villages and stuff like this. Not so much as the Renaissance. Okay, the Renaissance period was already pretty developed. They were, you know, it's when Esau, after 1,000 years was really let up, and they went forth and deceived the nation. So of course that's when they went through and found as many different artifacts that they could you know, iconoclasm. Do iconoclasm upon, repaint over paintings, destroy paintings, burn things, and of course with that enact certain decrees and laws about how you can depict individuals, right? And it actually talks about that. If we go back here, it says the ubiquity of a white European, and I'm not going to say the J word anymore, I've already said enough, savior largely stems from Renaissance and Middle Ages artists who painted the savior to look like people in their own communities. That's what they say. And it's because, again, this is all prophesied within the Bible. It says, colonial expansion. This European artistic tradition was spread globally through colonization and mass media productions like Warner Salmon's Head of Christ, further ingrained a white aesthetic into Western culture. Expert insight. It says, to dive deeper into the history behind the phenomenon, you can read the University of South Carolina article on the evolution of the white Hamashiach. It says, why brown or other Yahweh depictions are still abundant. It says contextual adaptation. Hamashiach is frequently depicted in ethnic features of the cultures in which Christianity is practiced, resulting in Asian, Black, Indigenous, and Hispanic depictions. Well, yeah, but you're always going to have, the original, all right? Again, they try to, depict and do stuff, but no, the original, if you look at the original ones, if you look into the Russia, you look at even, like, a lot of the ones that these 1948ers have in their synagogues, they're all brown, all right? They know what they're doing, all right? And a lot of the original artifacts are within the Vatican, but they don't, of course, they have to hide those things because they would give too much historical context, and they can't have that, all right? We don't know exactly what the Ark of the Covenant has on it. There could be depictions on there. There could be different things on it that they don't even want out, okay? There could be artifacts out there that prove, I won't say there could be, there more than likely is, all right? I can almost guarantee there's artifacts out there that the Vatican owns, controls, or not just the Vatican, but 1948ers over there in Israel, own, control, and obscure because they depict the Israelites, all right, as how we are, all right, various shades of brown. And, with the lands that we've been in, some of us became very, white looking, like such as myself and other people as well. Some people are very, very light. Some people are very, very dark still. All right, some people look more like white people. Some people look like Asian people. Again, you had Jake go everywhere. If you had Jake go over, 1,000 years ago to, the Asias, and they've been there ever since. And again, it goes to the seed line of your father, and they were getting with Asian women. And again, women have no bearing on what you are as far as a nationality, but they can affect how you look. Again, your great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather, all right, was a black man, but now you look like, Shangguan, all right, and you're just walking around looking like a regular little Asian man, but, you hear about the truth and you're drawn to it. Well, I wonder why that is. It says, historical fact, we're going to just, it says, Yahushua was a Semitic Jew, that's true, born in the Middle East. His actual historical appearance was that of a man with brown skin, dark hair, and deep facial features. Yeah, very, very brown skin. Not olive skin, not tan skin, brown, as in, very, 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 very dark, i.e. black, as we would call it today. It says dark hair and deep facial features. And a lot of people say, well, you look at the people in the Middle East, the Middle Eastern people, look, okay, it's very easy to get your mind messed up by looking who's there today. All right, for example, the 1948ers, all right, the people that are calling themselves the Jews of the day, all right, these individuals were not there prior to 1948, okay? You had the Palestinians there, all right, and the Palestinians aren't even as dark as they once were, all right, and the 1948ers are coming, oh, that's what they didn't look like that originally. The Palestinians didn't even look like that originally, all right? The Palestinians were much darker, but with time, things change, people inhabit different lands. For example, you could go and look at South Africa and say, oh, well, see, this place must have always been white. It wasn't. It was colonized. Okay, there's a lot of these lands that were colonized, and the people that are dwelling in those lands currently were not the original people that were dwelling in those lands prior. Okay, that's what you need to understand about that's a historical fact if you want one. So it says public discourse. The movement surrounding the radicalization of Yahushua is widely discussed. You can check out community discussions on Reddit to see how theologians explain the diversity, or read this BYU Daily Universe piece. I'm good. I'm not going to read anything from the Mormon, the College of the Mormons. All right, Brigham Young was actually a racist. Okay, he was you should look at some of his comments. Okay. And also, he perpetrated the whole Curse of Cain bullshit. So no. Nope, it says how art has historically affected racism within the church. Absolutely. And then I said, did Europeans seek to destroy non-white depictions? And it says, yes, you're in it bullshits. All right, it bullshits, and then it caught itself. Yes, European colonial religions authorities systematically sought to destroy indigenous religious image, which they viewed as pagan or demonic idol worship. However, their destruction was targeting non-Christian gods rather than non-white depictions of Hamashiach. That's what they say. It says, when it came to the representation of Yahushua, the approach was less about active destruction and more about institutional suppression, replacement, and strict control. So they really gave it away, even though they weren't trying to give it away. They didn't necessarily destroy all of them. They more so suppressed, all right, those images, replaced those images, and had strict control on those images. Part of that was what? It says the destruction of indigenous sacred art. Well, that's not the one we're talking about. That's dealing with, you can see Matt, and a lot of these depictions of the time of Yahushua probably fell into this category, and they called them pagan, but they probably weren't. Massive bonfires in the 16th century, Spanish friars famously conducted massive iconoclastic burnings of Aztec and Maya codices, statues, and sacred items, labeling them superstitions and falsehoods of the devil. Some of that stuff ultimately was. The Aztecs and the Mayans were completely bugged out. All right, it says eradicating native belief systems. The destruction was part of a larger campaign to erase traditional non-Christian identities so that populations would be forced to adopt European norms and faith. Well, they say that, but again, during the colonization, they were saying Indians were dancing around fire. As they said, Indians, Native Americans, Gadites were dancing around fire saying Yahweh, 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 which I don't necessarily know which way you could take it. There's two different ways you can take this as, and I pondered it, is as the European people that were, that were studying the Native Americans, they didn't get the name right, and they were actually saying Yahweh, 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 or they were incorrectly pronouncing it, again, because they'd been scattered and they were bugged out and they didn't know, they really had lost the name to some extent, really to the full extent. If you lose it a little bit, if the name's Yahweh and you say Yahiwah, you've lost it, all right? It's close, but it's not accurate, okay? And that's just one of the things that you can go either way with it. They could have either been saying Yahweh and chanting around the fire, or they could have been saying Yahiwah, as they said, or Yehovah, or whatever it was saying. I don't know, either way you want to go with it, it shows you that was there in some extent, and it wasn't from European settlers. So where did that come from if they weren't exposed to biblical tradition? Okay, so Europeans like to be the ones that classify, well, we brought Christianity. You didn't bring Christianity. Well, I mean, you did. You didn't bring the Bible. You brought modern Christianity, plantation Christianity. That's what you brought, okay? And you established that, okay? Again, not saying Yahushua, but saying Jesus Christ and, all these different things, Christos and all these different things. That's more so what you were involved in, right? So it says, the replacement, not destruction, of depictions of Yahushua. It says, because indigenous and African populations did not originally have images of Hamashiach, they did. It says, Europeans did not arrive to find a wealth of non-white depictions, art to smash. Sure. Again, this is part of their lying, right? They go astray as soon as they be born speaking lies. This is it. It says, instead, they carefully controlled the introduction of new imagery. Okay, so at least they gave you a little bit of truth here. They put sanctions on it to where, you had to make him white, all right, if you depicted him. It said, enforced European standards, European colonial authorities and Jesuit ministries established strict seminaries of painters in colonized regions like Latin America and parts of Asia. They taught local converts to paint the Madonna and Hamashiach explicitly using European visual models, giving them pale skin, light features, and European clothing, and enforcing racial hierarchies. In colonies like New Spain, a rigid caste system existed. Depicting Hamashiach exclusively as white reinforced the idea that white Europeans sat at the top of the spiritual and social hierarchy, while darker indigenous populations were naturally subservient. So again, we don't need to go on too much about it, but I'll scroll down if you really want to read more about it. You can pause. All right, and then you can go and see it. You can even see right here. This was an interesting one. It said the myth of abundant global art. When European colonizers expanded in Africa and Americas, they did not discover a vast library of pre-existing non-white Christian art to destroy because Christianity was new to these regions. No paintings of Hamashiach existed there yet. Sure. It says European authorities did not need to smash local art. Instead, they dictated new visual standard through colonial art schools like the Cusco School in Peru. Missionaries forced local artists to abandon native aesthetics and paint Hamashiach exclusively with pale skin and European features. So, I mean, that's, and they say, all these different things. Sure. There was one actually that showed, there's one that actually talked about, they said, there was a myth. Let me see. Can't remember what it went. Might have been another thing I was looking at, but there was one that was like, it was a myth that they were actually destroying, because I guess there was a myth that one of the kings actually implemented a rule that all that art had to be destroyed. I can't remember where it was, but let me see. I thought it was in here. There's another one. Oh, here it is. There's a widespread internet myth that Pope Alexander ordered, what is that, what is VI? I always get that confused. VI, is it 5? Is that 6? That's 5. No, that 5. No, 5 is V. What is this one? 6. It is. Okay, Slovakia. I get them all confused because I know IV. That one's 4. Okay, so VI. Okay, I got it. All right, Slovakia. It says there's a widespread internet myth that Pope Alexander the Sixth ordered the active destruction of Semitic or dark-skinned Yahushai paintings. Historians found no record of such a decree. Rather than tracking down and burning non-existent white depictions, Europeans controlled how he was drawn going forward. Sure. All right. There's a myth, and if there's a myth about it, I mean, it's probably true. But anyway, I got 2 scriptures here, just a little, quick hitter, and then, closing it out. I wanted to get Isaiah 10:1, okay? And it reads, "Woe unto them that decree unrighteous decrees, and that write grievousness which they have prescribed." And with this, you can go ahead and say, regardless of whichever you want, they showed up and they actually found a picture. And, okay, say that they didn't. They still put active sanctions and rules on forcibly making painters depict him as white, okay? European, dressing like European, looking European, having European features, and that is an unrighteous decree, okay? A decree is a law, that is a writ, that is essentially a order, all right, a list of rules that has gone out, okay, that you have to abide by, okay, and they do ones that are unrighteous. For example, people that are in that area, you can't depict them as brown anymore, you must depict them as white, okay, like us, all right, because again, you have to show us as being superior. Well, if you were so superior, all the paintings would have been about you in the first place. You wouldn't have had to bust off noses. You wouldn't have had to destroy art. You wouldn't have had to repaint over paintings. You wouldn't have had to take all these things and do massive bonfires and burn them. They would just be of you because you're, so superior. All right, like how before you came, all the depictions were of very dark melanated individuals. All right, but of course you had to remove those. You had to get rid of those because, again, that hurt you. That interfered with your God complex. All right, you didn't want to be looked at as lesser when all these depictions are out there because, again, you want to be looked at as, the best, the top. But meanwhile, all these depictions are out there, so you can't very well be looked at as the master race, all right, to quote, some German bullshit. You can't be looked upon as the master race when then there's no depictions of you, all right, there's no statues of you, so you have to knock off noses, and then you can say, those were of us. Well, why'd you knock off the noses? Because I don't know if you know this or not, one of the most telling things, all right, about an individual that's not white is the nose. Okay, if you look at Middle Eastern people, they have a different nose than so-called white people. If you look at black people, they have a different nose than so-called white people. If you look at anybody, okay, who's non-European, okay, they have a different nose, okay? It's like I thought I was going to sneeze. But they have a different nose, and everybody has a different nose. Esau has everybody has a very distinct nose, and Esau has a very distinct nose. And they can't go about and masquerade and say, this is us, Meanwhile, when there's this huge giant nose, all right, indicative of either a so-called Negro, a so-called Arab, right, or whatever you want to be. Again, noses are very indicative. Features are very indicative. The nose and the eyes and the lips, all right. Destroy those, and you could say it's of anybody, all right, because, or destroy the head, knock the head off completely. They do that a lot, too, and that's just a body of a human being, all right. You can't tell without the features, all right. Anybody can be skinny or fat. So, but that's what they do. They make these unrighteous decrees, all right, and they say, oh, you must depict any biblical individual as being white, all right, because we're on top. Well, if you were on top, you would already be depicted, all right, but you weren't, so you had to forcibly put yourself in there, and that was prophesied in 1 Maccabees 3:48 within the Apocrypha. Again, another book from the Bible, which you individuals removed. Okay, you're removed because why? They're very telling. They're very indicative of the things that are happening and who you are and who we are. So, of course, the Protestants were the ones to blame with that. They're the ones that, started the whole Bible destruction group and got the Apocrypha removed from the Bible. You can go look that up. Is it true that the Protestants got the Apocrypha removed from the Bible? And watch it say no. It should say yes. Yes, it is largely true, but with a few important historical caveats. Protestant reformers did not immediately throw these books out, but they eventually moved them to a separate section and largely stopped printing them. Well, we didn't completely get rid of them. We just moved them out of the Bible and, stopped printing them completely. So the story of how the Apocrypha shift from being standard reading to absent in most modern Protestant Bibles is driven by a mix of theology and economics. Anyway, you can go into this. You can look in this. That's not what we're necessarily going to get into. But they wanted it out. So the Apocrypha was originally in the Bible. You'll hear a lot of Christians say, well, that's not in the Bible. The Apocrypha's not in the Bible. Well, it was originally in the Bible. If you look at the 1611, it was in the Bible. All right. If you look into the oldest depictions, you'll find it in the Bible. But you won't find it in your regular King James Version now. Why is that? Because they got it removed, because they don't like it. Why? Well, because things like 1 Maccabees 3:48, of course, which says, and laid open the book of the law, wherein the heathen had sought to paint the likeness of their images. All right. And what does this mean? It says, laid open the book of the law. What is the book of the law? The Bible. And what did they do? The heathen, all right, those that are not Israelites, had sought to paint the likeness of their images. Okay. So they wanted to put their likeness in the Bible, and they did it. First page of the 1611. All right, if you look up KJV 1611, I guarantee it. You go into the pictures. You're gonna see the opening page. It's gonna have there it is. And they sought to paint their likenesses, and there they are. Right there. But still got the name of the Father right up at the top, Yahweh. So they did it, all right? That's one of the things that they did. And again, the Bible isn't wrong, all right? The Bible will tell you what's going to be done. Well, through the Holy Spirit is going to tell you what's going to be done before it's done. And this is what they did. They sought to paint the likeness of their image within it, and they were able to do so. Go and look up Moses, go and look up Aaron, go look up anybody in the Bible. All right, and of course, Yahushai, all right, who incorrectly is labeled in the Bible as Jesus. Again, that's a false translation. And everybody knows what he looks like according to the world, right? So-called white European with blonde hair, blue eyes, right? So they were able to do that, and they decreed these unrighteous decrees. All right, these wicked decrees. Unrighteous is wicked. All right, wickedness, because they are wicked. They are the wicked. And, now if you go and look at these different books, who are you going to see? You're going to see them, because that's what they did. So, that's just a little quick hit. Just wanted to show that. Little interesting deep dive through Google's AI. I thought that was interesting, and especially the one about the myth. Oh, there's a myth that, the Pope, Alexander the Sixth, he actually, I doubt that was a myth. I doubt that was a myth. There's more than likely a lot of truth to that he sought the destruction of melanated images, because that's exactly what these fucking Edomites do. So that's going to be the lesson. All right, just a little short one. Lord was edifying. Again, I want to give all praise, honor, and glory to the Most High, Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem Rakakwadash. Shalom, brothers and sisters out there. Keep enduring, keep the faith. We're almost out of here. Until next one, Lord willing. Shalom.